Perek Eliezer, Perek Chav Daled. What's printed is the beginning of Perek Chav Daled. We said we attached it to Perek Chav Gimel. We appended it to that because in the Higra edition of Perek Eliezer, it was the end of Perek Chav Gimel. So over there, Perek Chav Daled starts with the words Rabbi Eloi Omer, which is the first few lines into Perek Chav Daled. So that's what we're up to. Now we're going to discuss the story of the Dor HaPalaga, the generation of the dispersal of languages at the Tower of Babel. Rabbi Eloi Omer, or in the Girsa of the Higra edition, says Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Hayu moilidin es b'neihem ufarin v'ravin kivin sheretz gadol. In the generation after the Mabul, people would give birth to children and would be fruitful and multiply like a big insect. Shisha b'choleda, meaning they would give birth to 6 kids at a time. And I guess the Medrash is trying to tell us that's why the world was repopulated so quickly. The Mabul happened, I believe, in the year 1656 of creation, and the Dor HaPalaga happened in 1996. So like in 300 years, the world was like completely repopulated, which is pretty fast. So it's saying that 6 people were born at a time. It's an interesting thing I found over here, the Pirush Rekeach al Torah. Well, what's the source of this idea that there were 6 people born at a time? We mentioned it earlier in Perek Chav Beis when we were talking about the generation of the Mabul. It also said 6 people were born at a time. But over here it says 6 people were born at a time in the generation of the after the Mabul. So where do we come from? So the Pirush Rekeach al Torah in Parshas Noach, Perek Yud, Pasuk Yud Ches, makes a drasha. He finds it in the pasuk right here. And the pasuk says, when it's talking about all the descendants of Shem, Cham, and Yafes, so we know that Cham had a son named Canaan, and it goes to the sons of Canaan. Canaan Yolad as Sidon, Bechori, Vesches, Zivusi, Amori, Gergashi, Chivi, Araki, Sini, Arvadi, Tzmari, V'Sachamasi, V'Achar Nafetzu, Mishpachais HaKnani. It says the word Mishpachais HaKnani. Now, there's an interesting thing that every time the word Mishpachais is in Chumash, not in Tanakh, but in the first 5 books in Chumash, the word Mishpachais, or any plural form of the word Mishpacha, so there's no Vav in the word. Mishpachais, we usually would spell it Mem, Shin, Pei, Ches, Vav, Taf. Everywhere in the Chumash, it's spelled without a Vav. It's missing a Vav. So the Rekeach says, except over here when it says Mishpachais HaKnani, so there it says it with a Vav to be meramis to this idea that in the generation after the Mabul, they were giving birth to 6 at a time, because Vav has a numerical value of 6, so that's why that's the pshat in this medrash over here. Or that's what the medrash is darshaning it from. That's what the Rekeach says.
Yeah, but in Mitzrayim, the Jewish women get 6 at a time also.
But that's a different thing, because there it says Vayishritzu, Vayirbu Ma'id. It says in the pasuk, Uvnei Yisrael Paru Vayirbu Vayishritzu Ma'id Ma'id. And Vayishritzu means they became like insects. So the Medrash understands that what it means they became like insects is like just like insects give birth to 6 at a time. So they too, the Jews in Mitzrayim give birth to 6 at a time. But here it doesn't say Vayishritzu. It says just as Pruruvu. But he's saying that we learn it from the extra vav in the word Mishpachais. It's an interesting thing. Now I looked. There's a book. It's a very handy tool if you're into these type of things. It's called a Concordancia. It's a concordance of all the words in Tanakh. So I looked over there and found another instance where it says Mishpachais in Chumash, and that is in Parshas Nosoi when it talks about Pikudei the jobs of the Bnei Gershon. So over there it says.
Rashi brought this too.
What?
There was at some point maybe it was this word. Rashi also brought this, not just the Rokech, but there's a Rashi. This is the only Vav.
Oh yeah, the Rashi on that pasuk.
I'm not sure it's this pasuk, but I know.
I don't see it here.
The last couple of psukim he brought
It's
down.
only Vav. How can we find in Parshas Nosai?
One second, Parshas Nosai, here, Perek Daled Pasuk Lamed Ches. In Parshas Nosai, so it says, the Lashon of the Pasuk is, Ufkude b'nei Gershon l'mishpachei sam or l'veis avei sam. And over there, when it says l'mishpachei sam, it's spelled with a Vav. So, I don't know, it's a little bit of a hara. It could be that the exact chaser v'yaser of words, whether they have like an extra vav or extra yud or whatever, wasn't necessarily 100% the same thing throughout all of Klal Yisrael, at least in the time of the Rishonim. So it could be that the Rekeh didn't have it spelled with a vav over there. It could be. I don't know. It's a little bit of a stretch to say such a thing, but so that's why it could be. I don't know. But that's what the Rekeh says, because it says Mishpachei Saknani with a vav. That's where we're dashing this thing from. There's actually a very interesting story about this. It's a shtickle famous story about the Taz and the Bach. The Taz wrote on the Shulchan Aruch and the Bach wrote on the Tur, very famous Mefarshim in Paiskim and Halacha, and the Taz was actually the son-in-law of the Bach. So the story goes, how was it that the Taz came to marry the daughter of the Bach? You heard this story?
I think I read one of the books of Yeridah.
Oh, so the story goes that the Taz and the Bach were learning B'chavrusam, and they were learning Hilchos Ksivas Sefer Torah. So the halacha is when you write a Sefer Torah, so every line in the Sefer Torah has to have 30. It has to be the space of 30 characters. Why? So they say the halacha is that it needs 30 characters because the longest word in Chumash is the word Lemishpachei Sehem, and the word Lemishpachei Sehem is spelled with 10 letters. So therefore, you have to say that word 3 times because the shortest pasuk has 3 words in it. So 3 times the longest word for the shortest pasuk is going to be 30 characters. And that's why every Sefer Torah has 30 characters. So the Taz asked the Bach, he said to him, wait a second, but the word Lemishpachei Sehem in Chumash is spelled without a vav. So it's only 9 letters. So why are we makbid to have 30 letters? It should really be only 27, because every time you say Lemishpachei Sehem, it's only 9 letters. And there's no vav, so why are you telling me that you need 30 letters? There should be only 27 letters. That's the question that the Taz asks the Bach. The Bach says, oh, it's a good question. He calls in his daughter. He says, oh, come here. I believe her name was Rivka. I think her name was, I have it written down somewhere. I happen to be a descendant of the Taz and the Bach, so on my family tree I wrote down what her name was. I think her name was Rivka. He calls in his daughter, Rivka, no, come here. So he tells her, we're learning over here, and the halacha is that you're supposed to have 30 characters because L'mishpachei Sehem, and this young bacher over here is asking that in Chumash it never says L'mishpachei Sehem with a vav. So what do you do? So she says, first of all, there's the longest word in Tanakh is for sure 10 letters. If it's not L'mishpachei Sehem, so it's the word Achashtar Panim in Megillas Esther, which is spelled with 10 letters. So there you already have a letter, you have 10 letters. And then she says, second of all, even though in Chumash the word Lemishpachei Sehem is spelled without a vav, so it's only 9 letters, but in Sefer Yeshua, Perek Yud Ches, Pasuk Chaf Aleph, it says Lemishpachei Sehem with a vav. That's what she said. So then she went back out or whatever, and then the Bach turns to, she said, he turns to Taz, and he said, no, she knows what she's talking about, she has Yiras Shamayim, she knows how to learn, and whatever. So he said to her, I think you just saw her, she's beautiful like the moon. Right? You're asking her, she's beautiful like the moon? And he said, yeah. So he said, no, maybe it's time to be Kaddish Levana. So that's the story they say about how the Taz became the Bach son-in-law. Right, that was Agav.
I didn't know the story. This one I just heard from you.
Okay, fine. So they were giving birth to 6 kids at a time in the generation of the Tower of Babel. All the people of the world was one nation with one heart and with one language. As it says in the Bach, the whole land was one language and one word. Or dvarim achadim could mean one thing. The Radal says it wasn't even just that they spoke one language, but that they had one mentality and one goal. Everyone had the shared goal and the shared mentality. It was just like one cohesive unity amongst all of society. It was one big society. There weren't any different groups. There's a lot of different details over here about the Dora Palaga that we're actually not going to get into because I discussed them in my book, so I don't feel like talking about them over here. But if you want to look at my book on Lashon HaKodesh, in the 2nd chapter, we speak all about this. But that's what the Radal points out over here. Umarsu Eretz Chemda. and these people despised the desired land, meaning they didn't like Eretz Yisrael. They didn't want to live in Eretz Yisrael. As we said in the previous parak, we said that Noach, after the Mabul, so we know that the Teva landed in Harei Ararat, which is in Armenia, or Turkey, or whatever, and then we said, but afterwards he went to Eretz Yisrael, because they say he was Makiv Korbanos by the Makom HaMikdash. So he was living in Eretz Yisrael. But these people, Dafka, didn't want to live in Eretz Yisrael. Mosu Eretz Chemda. They despised the desired land. Shem, it says in the Pasuk, Vayhi binosam mikedem. It was when they were traveling from the east. The problem is that Eretz Yisrael is not east of Bavel. We're saying that they're going to travel from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. So it says that they traveled from the east. But Eretz Yisrael is west of Bavel, not east of Bavel. So the Radal says that you have to explain that Mikedem doesn't mean east as a direction, but Mikedem, we said, we had this idea earlier in Perek, somewhere. I think it was in Perek Gimel, I think. We said that Mikedem doesn't mean only east, but it also means forward, but also it means from before. Kadmoin. Kadmoinia is earlier, ancient, right? So we said that Eretz Yisrael is. So he says that Eretz Yisrael is the ancient land, the Eretz Kadmoinia Shel Olam, the land of the ancient place. So we're saying that's what it means. They went from the ancient place, not from the east, but from the ancient place. Holchul Eretz Shinar. They went to the land of Shinar, which we would translate as Sumer, which is an area in Mesopotamia, in southern Mesopotamia. Shinar, that's what they say. Shinar Sumer. Umotzu Eretz Gedela, they found a big land, V'rachavas Yadayim, and very bountiful. V'kulach Mishar, and it was completely flat, a flat land, a plain. V'yashvu Sham, and that's where they settled. Shnema, it says in the pasuk, V'yimtzu uvik be'eretz Shinar, they found a plain in the land of Shinar. V'yeshvu Sham, and they lived there. What? Rabbi Kiva says, Hishlichu malchus shamayim alehem. They threw from upon themselves the kingdom of Hashem from upon themselves. V'himlichu alehem Nimrod, and they put upon themselves, they enthroned upon themselves Nimrod. Nimrod is Eved ben Melech, a slave, the son of a slave. Shlefisha kol b'nei Cham avodim him, because all the descendants of Cham are slaves. We said that even though Noach, the words of Noach's curse was that it was going on Canaan, but we explained last week that the curse itself actually included all the descendants of Cham. And Cham had a son named, Cham had a bunch of sons, and one of Cham's sons was named Cush, and Cush had a son named Nimrod. Cush had a few other sons also, but Cush had a son named Nimrod. So Nimrod was Cham's grandson. And we're saying that these people, when they moved to Bavel, they took away Hashem as their king, and they decided to make this human being a king, this guy Nimrod, who he was the king, and he was really supposed to be a slave, the son of a slave. That's what they put as their king. And then the Medrash says, like parenthetically, woe unto the land that a king reigns over it. Shinema, it says in the pasuk, it says Tachas Eved Ki Yimloich. The Radal brings the beginning of the pasuk is Rog Za'aretz, the land gets angry. Tachas Eved Ki Yimloich, when a slave becomes the ruler. That's what it explains over here. That really the descendants of Cham are supposed to be slaves, and Nimrod was a descendant of Cham, and he was supposed to be a slave, and instead he became a king. It's like the opposite. There's a pasuk Avadim Mashlubanu, the pasuk in Eicha. So Avadim Mashlubanu, Pashtus is talking about the kings of Bavel, Nebuchadnezzar. Maybe if Nebuchadnezzar is descendant of Nimrod and Cham, so it's saying Avadim, people who are supposed to be slaves, Mashlubanu, they ruled over us. It's like one of the. It's like so horrible that they're supposed to be in a subservient state, and instead we're subservient to them. So the pasuk that we just brought, it says Rog Za'aretz, so the land got angry. So it's saying the land is angry because the land recognizes that really it's the Malchus belongs to Kadosh Baruch Hu, and instead the Malchus was going to such a lowly person. But there's another nukud over here that Nimrod, as we're going to see later on, Nimrod was the main instigator of the story of the Tower of Babel. that he was the main guy, he was the driving force behind it. And Chazal tell us that his name Nimrod it alludes to who he was and what he did. Nimrod is like a lashon of Moired, a Yeridah, a rebellion. That what Nimrod tried to do is he tried to get all of humanity to rebel against Hashem. So Gemara in Eruvin, it says that Nimrod, why is he called Nimrod? Shehimrid kol ha'olam kulei b'malchusay. Because through his kingship, he had the whole world rebel against the Kodesh Baruch Hu. One more point, the Radal brings down the Rabbeinu Bechai in Parshas Yisro says that by the Aseret Dibros, so it says Hashem said the first one of the Aseret Dibros is Anochi Hashem Lekecha Asher Tzisicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim Me'beis Avodim. So the Pashut way of understanding that pasuk is saying I am Hashem your God who took you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slaves, meaning that from you used to be slaves, you were in the house of slaves because you weren't living as normal people, and I took you out from the house of slaves. But Rabbeinu Bechai in Parshas Yisro says that no, Mi'beis Avodim is going back on Mitzrayim. Asher tzisicha me'eretz Mitzrayim mi'beis Avodim. I took you out of the house of slaves because the Egyptians, the Mitzrayim was also one of the descendants of Cham, the son of Cham. So Mitzrayim are also slaves. So I took you out of Mitzrayim from the house of slaves, from the Mitzrayim. That's what Rabbeinu Bechai says. Fine. So the question is like this. Why did they make this guy Nimrod their king? What qualities did they see in Nimrod that made they made him as the king over themselves? So the Medrash is going to bring two explanations. Rabbi Chanina says, Nimrod gibar koyachaya. Nimrod was very strong. He had the muscles. Shneimar, it says in the Pasuk, V'chush yaladas Nimrod, Kush gave birth to Nimrod, Hu heichel yez gibar ba'aretz. And Nimrod was the first person to be a strong man in the world. So the reason, Rabbi Chanina is saying the reason why Nimrod became king was because he was a strong person. He was a powerful, strong person. So they admired that quality in him, and they saw that was something that would be he could protect them or whatever. So they decided that they're going to make him the king. That's Rabbi Chanina's pshat. That he himself was strong. Rabbi Yehuda says no, a different reason, similar but different. The tunic that Hashem made for Adam and for Chava was with Noach and his family when they were in the Teva. That the coat that Adam and Chava wore, Noach had it with them in the Teva. How did Noach get it? So the Sefer Yasha brings down that the Adam Rishon gave it to Chanoich gave it to Mesushalach, and Mesushalach gave it to Noach. And because it was this coat, which we'll explain in a few moments, what was the coat made out of, because it was something that came from Hashem and given to Adam Rishon, so they dafka wanted to preserve it, so they gave it over from generation to generation to make sure that nothing would happen to it. And we said before in Perek Gimel that this is one of the things that was created by Nishmashos. Agav, the Radal says that the reason why Noach took it with him into the Teva is because we'll see. Because these coat has the ability to subdue wild animals, so Noach took it with him so that when he feeds the animals, he wouldn't be putting himself in danger. That's what the Radal wants to say. Fine. So it was with them in the Teva. Ukishiyasam in the Teva, when they left the Teva, when they left the ark, L'kacha Cham ben Noach, Cham the son of Noach took it, V'yitzia imay v'nchila l'Nimrod, and he took it out with him, and he bequeathed it to his grandson Nimrod. Now, it sounds like over here that Cham, the son of Noach, he just took it. It didn't say that it was given to him. And the Radal says that in Sefer Yashar it says explicitly that Cham stole it. And I found another medrash. It says over here, it's called Medrash Aseres Malachim. It's printed in Eitzer Midrashim on page 461. Over there, it says a similar idea, but not exactly the same. It says that Noach gave it to Shem gave it to Aver, and Nimrod made a war with Aver, and when he defeated Aver, he took these clothes of Adam Rishon and he wore it. That's what it says in that medrash. So it says, when Nimrod would wear these clothes from Adam Rishon, every animal, wild animal and bird would fall in front of him and be subservient to him. So Kisvurin, people thought people thought that the reason why the animals were subdued in front of Nimrod was because he was so powerful, and the animals realized that he's so powerful, so if even the animals could recognize it, so we recognize that he's so powerful. Therefore they made him the king. Because they said, oh, he must be so powerful because look, the animals are meek when they come across him. So they made him the king. Shnamar says the pasuk, Al Kain Omer Kin Nimrod Gibar Tzayid Lefnei Hashem. Therefore, people say that, like, when you want to say that someone was a strong man, you say like, oh, he's like a Nimrod, who's a Gibar Tzayid, who was a powerful hunter in front of Hashem. So, in a nutshell, basically this clothing that came from Adam and Chava, so saying that it had the ability to make the animals subservient and calm them down. So the Radal says two explanations. Why is that true? It's really one explanation. It could be. One is because there's special clothing from Shemayim, so they could have special properties. And the other nakuda is that because originally Adam Rishon was the one who wore it, and we said in Parak Yud Aleph that when Adam Rishon was first created, so all the animals were scared of Adam Rishon. They thought that he was the one who created the world, and they started bowing down to him. And he said, "What do you mean bowing down to me? We should all go down together and bow down to Hashem." But the animals were originally scared of Adam Rishon, so the animals became conditioned to being scared of whoever's wearing these clothing. Even though he's not necessarily the same person, it's not Adam Rishon, but they thought that the clothing makes the man. No? So basically what the Medrash is saying over here, Rabbi Yehuda is saying that it wasn't that Nimrod himself was actually so strong, but that when he wore these clothing, it had certain properties that made it that the animals would be calm. So people thought that he was so strong, so that's why they made him king. And the first explanation, Rabbi Chanina's pshat, was that because he was so strong, they made him king. So the nafkamin is was he really strong, or did people think he was strong? That's the difference between them. There's an interesting the Radal.
Rashi points out that his strength wasn't strength. It was strength to convince other people.
Convince people.
So what was but that's not being.
That's not what the Medrash over here is saying. No. But the Radal points out an interesting thing. He tells you to look at the Zohar. The Radal tells you to look at the Zohar. In Parashas Boy, Daf Lamed Tes Amud Aleph. The Zohar brings this Medrash that Nimrod wore the clothing of Adam and Chava. And the Zohar says the Chazal say that Nimrod wore the clothing of Adam and Chava. But we have two questions. The Zohar says, first of all, it says Adam and Chava, right? So what, he was wearing both? He was wearing like a skirt and a pant? Like he was wearing what? He was wearing Adam's clothing and Chava's clothing? What happened to Chava's? Pashas means he was wearing Adam's clothing. So what happened to Chava's clothing? That's one kasha that the Zohar asks. Then the Zohar asks another kasha. It says, if Hashem gave special clothing to Adam and Chava, and that's what they wore, so if Nimrod got it or someone else got it afterwards, what were they buried in? Does it make sense that they took off these special clothes and wore something else, or that someone took off these clothes from them and put on other clothing? The Zohar says it doesn't make sense. Now, I'm not so convinced by these two questions. But the Zohar asks these two questions and concludes, not like Chazal. It says, no, rather you have to say that the special clothing that Hashem gave Adam and Chava, no other person in the world was able to wear it because they're spiritual clothing, they're not really physical clothing. And it basically, the Zohar argues on Rabbi Yehuda of our Medrash over here, and saying that no, Nimrod didn't wear the clothing of Rishon. That's what the Zohar concludes. So you have to say that the Zohar is going like Rabbi Chanina that learns that really Nimrod himself was strong, not that he looked strong because of his clothing. That's what I would say. So what were these clothing over here? What was so special about these begadim ketainis she'asa Kadosh Baruch Hu for Adam and Chava? So I wrote down a few explanations. The Sefer Tziyoni and the Shla say that it was made out of the skin of the Levyasan. The Hadar Zekanim brings down that actually it was the Big Day Kahuna. But then the Hadar Zekanim asks, but if it was the Big Day Kahuna, so what was Chava was wearing the Big Day Kahuna? It doesn't make sense. So the Hadar Zekanim says, rather you have to say it was like some special clothing that had pictures of all the animals on it. That's what, if you ever came across this idea, there was clothing that has pictures of animals on it, so that's where it comes from, the Hadar Zekanim. So like if if it had like a little mouse or something, so like if an elephant saw the code, the elephant would be subdued because it saw a mouse, it'd be scared. Is it really true that elephants are scared of mice? Don't know. The Chamdas Yamim says that it was a clothing that had like special precious stones on it, like the big tekuna, but not mamish the big tekuna. Yeah.
The clothing was to make animals subservient or also human beings subservient.
It sounds like it only worked on animals.
Because otherwise you couldn't have defeated Eber in a war. You would have been subservient to Eber.
Right, I hear. It sounds like from the message over here that it's only animals.
Assuming Eber was wearing clothing.
Once you
it could be was in his warehouse then.
In his closet. I don't know. You're right. But that.
Once you mentioned it, there's one of the, I forgot who it says, the one in Midrashim or Rishonim or somebody brings down an interesting story. Maybe it's Sefer Yasher even, that we're going to see at the end of the parak that Nimrod, that Esau got jealous of Nimrod and he wanted to get his clothing. So, but he said, like, if I fight him, how am I going to be able to defeat Nimrod? He's so strong. So apparently Yaakov Avinu gave, according to this Medrash, Yaakov Avinu gave Esau an eitzah, how he could defeat Nimrod. He said, like, let's go to Nimrod and challenge him to a duel. But tell him, look, I know that you have these special clothing, right? So you're not gonna, you obviously you'll defeat me because you have these special clothing. But that doesn't mean that you're more powerful than me. So you have to tell Nimrod, you have to take off these clothing to make it a fair fight, and then we'll see who's stronger, right? And then of course Nimrod takes off the clothing, and Esau grabs the clothing and runs away. Something like that.
He killed him, no?
He killed him, and they took the clothing and ran away.
So if he killed him, it sounds like he overpowered him.
Yeah.
It sounds Esau physically was stronger than Nimrod.
Yeah.
Esau killed him.
But we'll see. It's machlokes, but Pirkei de Blazer holds that Esau killed him. Yeah.
It says that he was tired. He was tired because
he wants to kill. Yeah.
Why was he tired?
Because he did shluchas dom. He did a few things.
He was murdering. Yeah.
A few different wrong things he did. One of the wrong things he did was shluchas dom, that he killed Nimrod and his son, I think, also. No.
Right. According to the Targum Yeridah, says his son. Yeah.
So he was. That's why he was tired, because it was the day of Abraham's funeral.
And also because he committed 5 affairs on that day, so it tired him out.
Right.
What about the shot that it's the nails?
So I think that
With the skin, the ore was this. That's when somebody told me that's the reason why we don't cut our nails after Shabbos, because that's when they got the nail. That's when they got the clothing, which was made of the substance.
that was the clothing before the chait or after the chait. I don't remember.
After, I don't see the clothing he.
It had to be after the 8th.
Oh, that's before.
We were wearing
And we saw that, right?
Right. I think we saw that.
At the beginning.
What part was that?
Before the 8th.
No.
Their
So
skin. What was the question? What was their skin?
Oh, what was the skin like?
And they say, I think, some people.
that was before the chait. In Perek Yud, it says that they wore like a cloth sort of skin of nail skin all over their body. But then after the chait, in Perek Chaf Aleph, it says that Hashem gave them skin made out of. No, it wasn't Chaf Aleph. It was Chaf. It says Hashem gave them clothing made out of the skin of the Nachash. So before they wore nails, and afterwards they wore snake skin. Fine.
He only mentions here one, the Ticha. You heard the Gears of Fire?
Yeah. He was Baal Naira Mirasa, and he had relations with a betrothed woman.
He was married with both women. He murdered.
Denied the birthright.
Denied the birthright.
Resurrection of the dead, I think.
Yeah.
Denied resurrection. Yeah. That's what he said. Because who cares about how look at him?
Right. Okay.
He worshiped idols.
He was not.
So that's why they made Nimrod the king over them, either because he was actually strong or because people thought he was strong because of his clothes. Okay, so what did Nimrod do? Nimrod said to his nation, let's go and build for ourselves a huge city. And we'll live over there. All together in this big city. Not lest we be scattered all across the whole world like the previous people, like the Radal says that he's referring to the generation of the Dor Mabul. That we don't want it to happen like it happened to them, that there was a Babel all over the world, so rather we're all going to live together. Now, the logic over here is a little bit like, how does that work out? Because we don't want a Babel to come, so we're all going to live together. Not sure. But the Radal has a whole theory that he speaks about over here, and also in Perek Yud Aleph, that one of the ways that Nimrod was able to get them to make him king over them is that basically something that politicians do nowadays, called fear-mongering. You get everyone scared, and you can come up with whatever you want, and they'll just buy it, right? So they're saying, everyone listen to me, because otherwise there's going to be a mabul. So everyone gets all scared. Oh, we don't want a mabul, so we'll just listen to him. Right? It's like people do it nowadays. I'm the only person who knows how to deal with global warming, so everyone should vote for me, because otherwise, the world is going to be destroyed. Or, I'm the only person who has the guts to fight the Arabs properly, so you have to vote for me, because otherwise, we're all going to be killed.
Oh, what did Bush do in 2005?
What?
Bush in 2005.
I'm not saying specific things. I'm just like this idea. That's why I chose one example from the left and one example from the right. I'm just saying that everyone does it. That's a way of manipulating people, right? And the other way that you manipulate people is you come up with a common enemy. Right? The common enemy, Nimrod's common enemy. Our enemy is God. God is like, He's the one who's making all the problems. If we can go and fight him and beat him, we'll take care of everything. We're going to build a huge tower in the middle of the city, and we're going to go up to Shemayim. Purpose? Because the power of Hashem is only with water. Because they only saw that Hashem could do a mabul. So they said, Hashem will make a flood. So the power of the flood, we can beat the flood by going up all the way to, the Marzu says, we'll go up all the way to Shemayim, we'll go on top of where the water comes down, and then the flood can't affect us. It says, and with that we're going to acquire for ourselves a great name in the land. I don't know what does it mean a great name, because if they're the only people in the world, so then obviously they have a great name. Like, a great name sounds like we want other people to know about us. So maybe it's talking about for subsequent generations. I'm not sure. It says, we want to make for ourselves a name. Okay. So the major question is like this: what were the people that were trying to make the Migdal Bavel, the Tower of Babel, were they stupid or like retarded or something? Like, what's wrong with them? They didn't see that in the previous parak, people who made the Mabul, they were trying to rebel against Hashem, and Hashem smote them. So, like, why did they think that they would be different? Why did they think that they would be more successful? Why did they think they would be better than them?
And why did they think that it says Penna Futz Alpne Arab Karishonim?
Yeah. We said Karishonim like the people of the Mabul.
They died. That's not Futz Alpne Arab.
No, so I think what you have to say is that when the Mabul came and the whole world was covered in water, so then the water sort of spread everything out. I think that's what it means. I'm not sure.
That's what ended up happening to them.
Yeah. That's not the Iker punishment. The Iker punishment was that the water came and killed them, not that they were scattered. It's hard to fit exactly into the words. You're right. So Rabbi Elyon Israel asked this question, and Rabbi Elyon Israel says that you have to say that they were thinking that the problem of the Dor Mabul we know was Molekol Aretz Chamas. The people were stealing and they were acting improperly to each other. So because they're acting improperly to each other, so that's why Hashem destroyed them. But if we're all going to go together and we're going to be united, then Hashem is not going to destroy us. Then we could actually defeat Hashem. United, we could defeat Hashem. Divided, we won't be able to defeat him. That's what Rabbi Elyon says. What were they thinking? Then he tells you to look at a medrash called Eisius Rabbi Kiva Eis Reish. And over there it gives a little bit of a different explanation. So we're going to read it. This is from Eitzer Midrashim, starts on page 422, goes to 423. Eisius Rabbi Kiva is a medrash from Chazal, where Rabbi Kiva has drushes about every letter in the Aleph base and says what does each letter, what's the significance of each letter, and it gives all kinds of interesting ideas. So on the letter Reish, Ein Reish Ela Migdal. The word Reish, the letter Reish refers to tower. Shebano b'nei Dor Hapalaga, that the people from the Dor Hapalaga built. Shurosha Magila Shemayim, because the head of that tower reaches the Shemayim. Shemer Hava Nimna Lanu Ir Migdal v'Reisha b'Shemayim. Come, let's build a city, and the tower of the city will the head of the tower, the top of the tower will reach the Shemayim. Right? The Empire State Building. I don't know, the Sears Tower or something like that. What's the tallest building nowadays? Dubai?
Like the one in Dubai, yeah. Like son has a book with the tallest buildings, and it's Dubai. Far taller than everything.
But also, it was an apartment building or something, no?
Yeah, it's part of an apartment and a restaurant. It's taller than by far every other building.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it wide also, or it's like just?
But at the base, it's pointy. At least the picture shows it. It's very small.
Fine.
Picture.
But also at that time, Amru b'nei Dar hapalaga, the people from the generation of the division, they said, Loi shaitim hayu b'nei amabu she'amru l'bayim sur mimenu. Aren't the people from the generation of the flood, aren't they shaitim, aren't they stupid? Because they said to Hashem, remove yourself from us. Ad shehim talei me'amabu, until Hashem pour upon them the waters of the flood. And Hashem destroyed them from the world. So what are we going to do? We're going to build a tower from the land all the way up to the heavens. And we're going to live in it like the ministering angels. And what are we going to do? We're going to take hammers in our hands, and we're going to bang on the rakia, on the sky. And we're going to make it that when the waters from the heavens come down to the earth to destroy us, we're going to use these hammers to push the water to fall dafka where there's water in the Mayim Tachtainim by the world. We're going to make it that if Hashem wants to make a flood against us, so we're going to make sure that all the water falls into the ocean. It's not going to fall onto people with these hammers that we have, because we're smarter than everyone else. So that Hashem won't do to us like what He did to the Bnei Amabel, to the Dor Amabel. And then the Medrash says an interesting thing. It says, at that time, all the people of the generation of the Dor Palaga, of the Tower of Babel, they split into three groups. Each one had their own motivation of why exactly they wanted to build this huge tower. One said, one said, we're going to build this tower so we can go up to the Shemayim and we can colonize it. We're going to live up there like we live down here. We're going to make a colony on the moon. We're going to make a colony in the sky. That's what we're going to do. Just because we want to take over the Jetsons. What? How did the Jetsons beat the Flintstones? These are in the future, they're in the past. I don't know. The second group said, we're going to build a tower that's going to go all the way up to the heavens, and we're going to make for ourselves a name. Shame. And the Medrash over there says that the shame, the word name in this context, means they're going to make for themselves not a name, like we're going to be famous, but rather they're going to make themselves a name, and they're going to make themselves an avodah zarah. And it brings a pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim, says, "V'shem Elohim acherim lo yizkuru." You shouldn't mention the names of other gods. V'kas shlishis oimeres, a third group said, "Nivna alanu migdal me'aretz arakia v'nachtay hashamayim v'shem shamayim chatichas v'nasim l'chama im hakadosh baruch hu v'laninichum min kaimai." We said we're going to go up. We're going to build a tower that goes all the way up to the Shemayim, and we're going to take sharp objects or something, and we're going to cut up the Shemayim, and we're going to fight against the Kadosh Baruch Hu. We're going to make a war, and He won't be able to move us to other places. We're going to be able to decide where we want to live. So these are the three different things that are happening over here. So I would add that at this point you see that the whole idea was like, okay, we're better than everyone else because we're united and therefore we're in a better situation than the Dar Mabul. But like at this point already, when they started it, then it's like people are already starting to come up with different ideas. I want to do Avodah Zarah. I want to fight Hashem. I want to colonize the Shemayim. There's a split in their motivations. Rabbi Pinchas says, "Lo yahayu sham avanim livneis esa'ir v'esamigdal." They didn't have stones to build the city and the tower because they were living in Bavel, which is a bika. It's a plain. It's a flat land. There's no rocks. There's no mountains. So they didn't have that. So how do they? So what do they do? They would take limestone and they would form it, and then they would put it into a furnace and solidify it like a person who works with pottery. And then with that, they made bricks, and they were able to build their city and their tower.
An argument would be stones are not flat necessarily. It's not so simple to build that high with rocks.
You're saying another reason why they dafka would use bricks than stones.
Bricks are, but they fit together very nicely and they
Could be.
go higher. Someone I know who's very into this stuff, he says this is the first instance where they use technology in Chumash. This is the Indian here. They're beginning to use technology.
Oh, it's like technology against Hashem.
Yeah, they're from their own seichel. They're trying to.
No, but we had before that. We had what's it called? The sons of what's his name? Of Lamech. That this guy invented the different musician things, and this guy invented the what's it called? Blacksmith or something. I don't know. He probably asked that in the next part of the shir, but you missed it. Until they built up this tower, it was 70 mil tall. How much is 70 mil? How much is a mil? Do you remember offhand? Rabbi Palmer?
Close to a mile.
Mil is about a mile, yeah?
So I remember thinking that thought that that's basically almost a mile.
It's be'erach a mile, if I'm not mistaken. So it was 70 miles tall.
That's about space.
Is it?
60 miles of space. That's when you start floating. That's what I saw. 63 maybe. I don't know.
So 70 miles up is like mamish.
So they came to outer space. They asked him.
That's what it would seem like.
It means they made one mistake. They didn't realize that Hashem is not physical or spiritual. He's here like he is there.
Yeah.
They made a little error over there.
Right.
Even if they would have built all the way up, they would have never ended. They would have kept
Right.
going.
It was the famous shtickle from Rabbi Yonis and Eibeshitz that says based more or less that like they wanted to build a spaceship to go up to Shemaim. You ever heard this one? It's like a famous.
They're actually building a spaceship.
Yeah.
So he's the inventor of the idea of the spaceship then.
Rabbi Yonis and Eibeshitz?
400 years ago, he was 400 years ago.
I don't know.
The Black Homer was so smart they come up with this idea.
Okay.
Well, they built the pyramids.
Right? Well, or they had the Jews build the pyramids, maybe. I don't know. That's what people say.
Sounds like the Mitzrayim were smart there for some reason.
The Mitzrayim, yeah.
It's a steer, no? How did it become so smart?
I don't know. Well, you could be smart and be an Evid. I don't know if it's a steer. So Radal says that it was 70 miles tall, connected the 70 nations that helped build it. We'll see later on that it was 70 nations built it. Then he brings the Targum in Kehelis. I actually saw this Targum. I noticed it this year when we were reading Kehelis on Cholmeit Sukkos. That it says in the Targum in Kehelis in Perek Yud, it says that 1,000 kings joined together to help build the Migdal Bavel. So he says like, oh, it's 1,000, it's not 70. But okay, fine. And so we have this big, huge tower, and there were stairs on the east side of the tower and on the west side of the tower. The people who were bringing up the bricks would go up the stairs on the east, and the people who would come down from the stairs on the west. What's it called? The Radal says that Rabbeinu Bechaye, when he brings down this medrash, he has a girsa that it says that there were 70 stairs. So he says, what do you mean? If it's 70, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to say there were 70 stairs. Because if it's 70 miles tall, that means that each stair was 1 mile tall. You can't walk up a staircase that each stair is 1 mile. It doesn't make sense. So he says that when it means 70 stairs, it means 70 staircases. It says that each nation had its own staircase to go up the Migdal Bavel. So I think you see it again over here, that they're already starting to like split up. It's 70, each one has their own staircase. So what do you mean? I thought everyone is all together. They're already beginning to stop necessarily working completely united. Now you see this point in another way. Agav, he says that the Radal says that the reason why was that when you go up it goes from the east, and when you come down it's from the west. This is because they were mimicking the sun. The sun comes up from the east and it goes down in the west. So the way the program was to mimic the sun. And when you bring up the bricks, the guy bringing it up comes up from the east and goes down from the west. Fine. If a man fell and he died, because this is a lot of stairs, it goes very high. They wouldn't care about it. They wouldn't put their heart to him. They didn't care about him. But if one brick fell, they would sit down and they would cry and they would mourn over it, and they would say, woe upon us! When are we going to get another brick instead of this brick? And they would be all sad. So this is like another the liberal mentality where they didn't really care about the people, they cared about the ideas more, right? And then what's going to be? We need another brick. They were crying. Fine. The Marzu brings that it says in Sefer Yasha that it would take them a full year to make one brick. To get from one brick to make it and then bring it all the way to the top of the tower. It would take a whole year. So like when a brick fell or whatever, so like it's a loss because you would really have to wait a whole year to fill that loss. Okay. Avram ben Terach, Avram the son of Terach passed by and he saw them building this city and the tower. And he cursed them in the name of Hashem. He said, Bala Hashem palag l'shenam. Hashem should swallow them. Hashem should split their language. And we know that Api the Cheshvan, if you look in the Pesukim, you can make a partial Cheshvan. Avram Avinu was born in the year 1948, and therefore he was 48? How old was he? When by the Dora Palaga? It was 1996. 96?
So he was in his 50s, just below 48.
48. He was 48 years old, right? Avram Avinu was 48 years old, and that's when
He ran his fight with Nimrod.
Yeah. So in my book I speak about how a few different fights between Avram Avinu and Nimrod, and this is sort of one of them. Other Midrashim say better that as Nimrod wanted to do Migdal Bavel, and Avram and a few other people were opposed to Migdal Bavel. Here it doesn't necessarily say it like that Avram Avinu was opposed. It just said Avram Avinu passed by, he saw them building, and he cursed them out. Or he cursed them. He put the Hashem should swallow them up and split up their languages. The Ibn Ezra says a huge chiddush. Ibn Ezra in Parshas Noach says a huge chiddush. He says that Avram Avinu partook in building Migdal Bavel. That's what the Ibn Ezra says. I once asked Rosh Yeshiva about this. He says that Chazal definitely understand not like that. Because there's a Gemara in Avodah Zarah, it's also Yaakov Shemaini and Tilim. It says in the pasuk, Asher ish asher lo halach ba'atzos rishayim. And the Gemara says, I think it's in Avodah Zarah, it says that pasuk, Asher ish lo halach ba'atzos rishayim, is talking about Avram Avinu, who didn't go with the Atzos Rishayim, who didn't partake in building the Migdal Bavel. But Ibn Ezra is the one who also, he speaks out the whole cheshbon to tell you that Avram Avinu was 48 years old by Migdal Bavel. But I'm just remembering right now that there's a Marsha in Mesechus Avodah Zarah also, on Daf Tes, Mid Aleph, that the Marsha seems to say that Avram Avinu only started to learn Torah after the story of Migdal Bavel. And it says that he started learning Torah after Migdal Bavel, and it took him 5 years to learn Torah, and then he was 52, and that's when he started teaching others. And then when Avram Avinu was 52, what year was that? That was exactly the year 2000. So the Gemara, right? This is the pshat in the Gemara, because the Gemara says that the first 2,000 years of the existence of the world was Tohu, and the next 2,000 years of the existence of the world was the 2,000 years of Torah. So that 2,000 years of Torah started when Avram Avinu was 52 years old, which is 5 years after the Migdal Bavel. So the Marsha says, because first it took him 5 years to start learning after Migdal Bavel, then he started teaching other people, and that's when the 2,000 years of Torah starts. Marsha and Avodah Zarah Daf Tes. I just remembered it now. Okay. So that was Avram Avinu. He was telling them not to build, and he cursed them. But the people who were building, they despised his words like a rock that you throw on the floor. Like they didn't care about it. It was just there. They didn't pay attention to it. And then the Medrash says, Medrash says, is it not true that any the choicest and the best of stones, you don't just throw it on the floor and not use it, you use it in the corner of the house, the cornerstone, because it holds up both sides together. It's the best, you use the best stones for the corner. And they're just like disregarding Avraham Avinu as if he's nothing. Medrash says, Avraham Avinu, the Torah says, Even wasu habaynim, a rock, the boinim, the people who were building, despised it. Hayisal reish pina. It became the cornerstone. It became the cornerstone of the world. Now, Avraham Avinu was probably the most influential person who ever lived in the entire world.
I seem to recall that.
Want to argue with that?
Scroll is referring to David
That there's such a medrash. Yeah. It's a Gemara. There are the midrash that said because David Melech was. There's a story. It's brought down. The Yeridah brings it, and a few other. It's medrash Seichert maybe even. That there's a story that Yishai was upset that when he realized that he's from descendant of Rus, he's from Moav, so he thought that maybe he's Pasal Akal because the drasha of Moaviv Moavis wasn't so pashut, so he thought maybe he's not really supposed to get married. So it says that he's separated from his wife, and then his wife decided that she's gonna do a shtick on him, and basically he ended up propositioning his slave, but he thought it was his slave, but it was really his wife, and from that David Melech was born. But people thought that his wife became pregnant stam, not through him. So they looked at David Melech originally as illegitimate. So Even Masu Haboinim, the rock that the people hated, because they thought that David was like sort of right. They thought he was a mamzer, but he was Haisel Reish Pina. That's a different medrash on that pasuk.
But Avraham is the cornerstone
of the world. That's yeah.
Now today.
Reb Shimon Aimer. Reb Shimon says, "Kora Hakadosh Baruch Hu l'shivim malachim hasavivim kisei chvoidai." HaKadosh Baruch Hu called to the 70 angels which surround him on his chair of glory. V'amar lahem, Hashem said to them, "Boyu unevalbel es l'shenam." Come and let's mix up their languages, or their language. U'meinayim sheKadosh Baruch Hu yorad aleihem. How do we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu came down to Migdal Bavel? Shenera, it says in the pasuk, Hava nerda. Come, let's go down. Erda ein ksiv. It doesn't say I'm going to go down. Ela nerda, we will go down. Hashem said it. Hashem and his 70 angels said we're going to go down. Rashi in Chumash says it slightly different. Rashi says that because the Kadosh Baruch Hu was such an anav, he wanted to teach us the midah of anivus. So Hashem said it to the angel that to his Rashi says to his Beis Din, as if me and the Beis Din are going to go down and take care of the situation, even though it was really Hashem himself who was doing it. But here we're saying a different pshat, that it's going with the 70 angels. Yeah. Evan Masa Boino Isla Pina. Yeah, the Gemara is Marames to it, but it's more. The story that I said is more mafurish in other sources. Yeah, Psachim Kufiyat Tasmanaf. Okay. So Hashem is going to go with these 70 angels, and he's going to mix up all the languages and the nations. How do we know that Kadosh Baruch Hu made a lottery between the 70 angels? Shneimar, it says in the pasuk, "B'hanchel Elyon goyim." In Parshas Hazinu, it says like this. It says, "B'hanchel Elyon goyim." When Hashem was bequeathing the nations their heritage, B'hafridai b'nei Adam, when Hashem was separating the sons of Adam, when he was separating the different nations, Yatsev Gvulos Amim l'Mitzvah b'nei Yisrael. He erected the borders of the nations, K'mitzvah b'nei Yisrael, like the number of the sons of Yisrael. And we know that when Yaakov Avinu came down to Mitzrayim, it was 70 people of his family. That's the b'nei Yisrael. So we know that there were 70 nations. Hashem split up the world into 70 nations.
Where do we know that from before, from Bnei Noah? Who this is representing?
If you learn Parshas Noach really good, and you didn't know that there were 70 nations, you might not come to that conclusion.
Is it 71?
There's different numbers that you might come to, depending on who you count and what you don't count. But Chazal are first telling us There's a pasuk that tells you Yatzak Gulas Adam L'Mitzvah B'nei Yisrael, that there were 70 nations. How to count exactly the 70 nations in Parshas Noach? There's different ways of doing it. If you want,
you count Yefes, so you don't blame her as itself or not as itself.
do you count Nimrod as one of the nations himself? There's a lot of different.
Just splits between.
I know Article's chart.
Yeah, that's right.
It takes only one
They
side.
either take out Plishtim or Nimrod.
Yeah. If you look over here on the bottom of your picture of in the Bayis HaGadol, so he has two different ways of counting the 70, and one of the projects that I never get to work on is going through all the different ways of counting the 70. Rabbi Zariah Dorozi also has different ways of doing it. It's a very interesting sugya.
It's not simple as it is.
It's not simple, no. So Hashem made Kibiyachol a lottery between the different nations. And the portion, the lot of Hashem came out on Avraham Avinu and his family. Hashem Amai, Yaakov Chel Nachlaza. That's the next pasuk. Kichelek Hashem Amai. The portion of Hashem is his nation. Yaakov Chel Nachlaza. Yaakov is the portion of his nachal, of his inheritance. So Hashem split up the nations into 70, and Hashem got Yaakov, Bnei Yisrael, and each other nation, different malachim got different nations. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem said, Chevel v'goral zeh, this portion and this lot that fell, shenafal alai, that fell upon me, v'tzosi nafshi, my soul wants it. Obviously Hashem doesn't have a soul, but Hashem is saying that I'm happy with it. Shneimar chavolim naflu li b'ne'imim. A package fell upon me with pleasantry. It was pleasant. I wanted that package. Now, I personally, I don't know exactly how to understand what's happening here in the Medrash, because it sounds like, if you read it like simply, it sounds like there was like a lottery, and it happened to come out that like Bnei Yisrael went to Hashem, and each other nation went to like different malachim. It doesn't sound so right. Like it was just a lottery, and it happened to come out like that. So obviously it was Hashem didn't make a lottery. Sounds like it happened by chance. That's what I'm bothered by.
And the whole world was created, as you said, for Abraham and Israel.
Yeah. So like it was. I also, is Klal Yisrael considered from the 70 nations or not? Pashas not. So then it wasn't even in the lottery, Bachal, right? So I don't know. This whole thing gets like very problematic, and like there's a lot of things you have to like sit down and really think about how it works out. In the academic world, they have this whole like apikursuship shot in these psukim over here in Parshas Hazinu. I'll tell you very bekitzer what they say. They basically have an idea that the early Jews believed that there were gods of different nations, and that Yud Kei Vav Kei is like the God of the Jews, and each nation had like their own God, and then there was another God on top of everything. And they want to say that God on top of everything was named Kael or El or Elyon. And we find in different.
I've seen these books.
You've seen these books.
All the books he says.
The MS is that we find in writings of different non-Jewish nations, Canaanite nations, that they refer to their God as El or Elyon, which are terms that we use when we talk about Hashem. So the academic world wants to say that it was basically agreed upon by most of the early tribes and nations, whatever, in this area, that there was a supreme God called Elyon, and under him were different other gods, and Yud Kei Vav Kei was like a sub-god under him. So they understand it as that this Elyon guy, so he was splitting up all the different nations, right? And there were 70 of them, and what came to the Jews? Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's the God that became the God of the Jews. That's how they understand these psukim.
I've seen books which say other things. They said the Yidden who came by Yeshua to conquer Israel wasn't a nation, it was different barbarian tribes. It came through the Arabian desert.
Yeah, okay.
It says that they came on the Germanic tribes to murder and plunder, and it wasn't even one nation, it was like a mixture of like 40 different nations.
And they say like Shem or Melchizedek was Shem. The Chazal tells us Melchizedek is Shem, and even Josephus says that Melchizedek is Shem. Says that he was Hukoyin Lekel Elyon. And his whole thing over there, he says Baruch Avram Lekel Elyon Kaneshem Al Aretz Baruch Kel Elyon Hashem Begets Rach B'Yadecha B'Yitin L'Maaseh Mikol. So over there by Melchizedek, Tafka doesn't say Hashem; it just says Kel Elyon. So they feel like Melchizedek, he was sort of like a neutral, like a higher type of priest. He was a priest for like the supreme God, not for like any specific nation God. That's what they want to say. But we understand that Elyon is another term for Hashem. So, but then if you think about it, it's a shtickle funny. So Hashem is making a lottery about the different nations, and then like Hashem got Klal Yisrael. Okay.
It's almost like you fear that Hashem would do a Gora.
Right.
He knows
that's
for him to use this thing we consider as
Kale, whatever it is,
yeah.
assigned us to Hashem.
Right. That's how they say it. But we understand that Kel is Hashem. So is that better? So Hashem made a lottery and we came out we got his portion. But like, how exactly to understand that? I asked a few people, some big Talmidei Chachamim about it, and they didn't know what to say. They weren't familiar with this piece of Pirkei Eliezer. So, fine, right there. Yeridah Kadosh Baruch Hu b'shivim hamalachim hastovim kisei chvaydoi. Kadosh Baruch Hu and the 70 angels that surround his chair of glory came down with him. Ubilbel es l'shonim l'shivim goyim or l'shivim lashon. And Kadosh Baruch Hu confused their language into 70 nations and 70 languages. Kol echad ve'echad goy uchsavai l'shonai. Each one of the 70, they became their own nation. They had their own form of writing and their own language. Umina malach al kol umma v'umma. And Kadosh Baruch Hu appointed an angel upon each and every nation. Now here it says Mina, HaKadosh Baruch Hu appointed it. Before he just said it was a lottery, right? So I don't know exactly how it works. V'Yisrael naflu b'chalkei v'chavlei. And Klal Yisrael fell into the portion of Hashem. Nofal, like lashon, like by chance, I don't know. V'alzeh nemar, this was, it says the pasuk Yichelek Hashem Amoi. I don't know, we just repeated what we said before. I don't know why the Medrash did. Uminayin Yeridah Kadosh Baruch Hu. How do we know Hashem himself came down? This is also repeating what we just said. Hashem, when it says the pasuk, a different pasuk. Vayered Hashem l'yiras esayir v'samigdal. Hashem came down to see the city and the tower. It says the Medrash Zo Yeridah Shnia. We mentioned in Perek Yadalit that we find 10 times in Tanakh that it says in Chumash that it says that Hashem came down. And the first one we mentioned over there was when he came down to speak to Adam and Chava about what they did wrong with the Eitz Hadas. And we said throughout the rest of Pirkei Eliezer we're going to go through the 10 times that Hashem came down, or at least most of them. And we hear this is the second one. This is the second time that it says that Hashem came down. But we spoke about, in my book I read about, is Lashon HaKodesh considered from the 70 languages? Is Aramis considered from the 70 languages? What else do we speak about in there?
I guess Hashem came down a third time to check about Sodom.
Yes, that's the next parak. That's next week. There's a lot of interesting ideas. Each person wanted, after this happened, each person wanted to speak to his fellow in Lashon HaKodesh. As the Radal says, that was the language that they spoke before Migdal Bavel. Which in my book we bring down from Rishonim and even from the Yerushalmi, Gemara Yerushalmi, that it's not so pashut what language spoke before Migdal Bavel, but Rashi goes with the Mahalach that it was Lashon HaKodesh, and Pirkei Eliezer is also going with the idea that it was Lashon HaKodesh. So they wanted to speak Lashon HaKodesh, but they couldn't. But nobody was able to understand the language of his fellow. So what did they do? So each guy took a sword and they started fighting each other because they couldn't get along. And half of the world population at that point was killed by sword. There was a major world war, and that was World War II. Half the world's population was killed. And from there Hashem scattered them along the face of the whole world. Hashem scattered them from there on the face of the whole world. But that's more or less the story of Migdal Bavel. Now the Medrash ties a loose end. We were talking about the coat of Adam and Chava. They went to Nimrod. So what happened afterwards? Rabbi says, Esau, Achav Shel Yaakov, Esau, the brother of Yaakov, Ra es hakutones she'asa Kadosh Baruch Hu l'Adam l'Chava al Nimrod. He saw this coat that Hashem made for Adam and Chava on Nimrod, v'chamar esam b'liboy, and he desired them in his heart. And he killed Nimrod and he took the coat for himself. As I mentioned before, the Rav Chaim Kanievsky, in one of his farm in Siach HaSadeh, he has like a thing called like Sefer Likutim or something. He discusses this in other places. Also, it's machlokes who killed Nimrod. Was Avraham Avinu who killed Nimrod, or was it Esau who killed Nimrod? So here we're saying that Esau killed Nimrod, and he's the one who took the big day, the what we call the big day chamudis, the desirable clothing of Nimrod. Targum Yerushalmi in Bereshis Memches Chaf Aleph says that Avraham Avinu was the one who killed Nimrod, and there's other midrashim that also seem to say that. If you learn that Amraphel from the four kings was Nimrod, and it says Avraham Avinu killed Amraphel, so then you have to say Avraham Avinu killed Nimrod. Right? So it says that in Targum Yerushalmi that Avraham Avinu took the clothes from Nimrod and he gave it to Yitzchak, and Yitzchak gave it to Esau because Yitzchak was under the assumption or was under the misimpression that Esau was his successor.
What happened after Esau?
Well, we'll see. How do we know that these clothes were desirable in the eyes of Esau? Shnei, it says in the pasuk that when Rivka told Yaakov to go get the brachas from Yitzchak instead of Esau, so Yaakov said, "What do you mean? He's going to feel me, and he's going to see that I'm not Esau because Esau was very hairy and I'm like very smooth." So what did Rivka say? Rivka said, "Yeah, wear these special clothing, and then he'll think that you're Esau." Vatikach Rivka as big day Esau b'nah hagadol hachamudais. Rivka took the clothes of Esau, her oldest son, hachamudais, the desirable clothes, the big day chamudais. So Rivka, Esau, Rashi says, I believe Rashi says this in Chumash, that Esau didn't trust anybody with these clothes. So when he wasn't wearing the clothes, he didn't even give it to his wives because he couldn't trust his wives. So he gave his clothes to his mother because he knew that his mother was like the only tzaddikus that he could trust. So he always gave his clothes to his mother to wash. So when he was out hunting, so
He knew his wives were no good.
right, that's why he changed some of their names there. But when he was out hunting, so the Mefarshim say that when he went out hunting to bring the food for his father, when Yitzchak was giving him the brachas, so he dafka went out without these clothing because he wanted to do it like he wanted to put his ability and his powers into it. He didn't want to have to rely on the special clothing in order to get the animals to bring to his father. So he gave it. He says the clothes were by his mother, and his mother gave it to Yaakov Avinu. When Esau would wear them, Nasa Gam Hu Gibar. Esau would also become a strong person. Now it says the pasuk, "Vahi Esau ish yedei tzayid." Esau became an ish yedei tzayid, who knew how to hunt. And maybe it could be that the pshat is that it's making sort of like a gzer shava. It was said by Nimrod. The Nimrod is Gibor Tzayid Lefnei Hashem. So here by Esau it says yedei tzayid. So it tells you that he was the same thing like Nimrod. But basically, Rivka gave those clothing over to Yaakov. When Yaakov left from in front of his father Yitzchak, after he got the bracha, he had these clothes. Omar, he said, "Ein Esau Russia roi lilbeish esakutainas halalu." Esau the Russia is not worthy to wear these clothing. V'chafar utmanam sham. And Yaakov Avinu dug and he buried them there under the ground, and he hid them. His package is hidden in the ground. So that's what happened to it in the end. Yaakov Avinu took it and he buried it and it was hidden, and that's the end of the story of the big day chamudis of Esau, of Nimrod, of Adam and Chava. That's more or less what happened over here.
He didn't give it to his sons.
Right. The chid over here is sort of miramis to a question that I wrote down. I wrote a whole arichos about elsewhere. That how was it that Yaakov was able to wear the clothing of Esau? There's a halacha that the clothes of an Am Haaretz are metame tumas medris. It has a special tumah. Chacham were glazer a special tumah on the clothing of an Am Haaretz. So how could Yaakov wear the clothing of Esau? So one of the Mefarshim, so basically what they want to say, a lot of Mefarshim, is that really it didn't belong to Esau. Esau stole it. So it wasn't really his clothing, so he couldn't really ask for it.
He stole from someone who stole.
He stole from someone who stole, yeah.
Why is he considered an Am Haaretz?
Esau?
Yitzhak was going to put him in charge. I mean,
Am Haaretz in the context of Tumah V'Tara just means somebody who's not careful in Tumah V'Tara. Okay, we can assume that Esau wasn't careful in Tumah V'Tara.
Did Gila obviously wasn't careful.
It's a different type of Tumah, but yeah, Tumah Ksiva V'Kares.
So Kavachoyme wouldn't be careful to
To real Tumah, I hear. Just one last thing. There's a Gemara of Avodah Zarah. I meant to bring a Gemara of Avodah Zarah with me, but I forgot to. It's a very interesting Gemara. Is there one here? No. The Gemara of Avodah Zarah says in Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis. The Gemara of Avodah Zarah says that there's a custom in Rome that once every 70 years they would take a lame person and put him on top. Well, you know what's the Gemara say exactly? They would take a lame, like a disabled person, and put him on top of a healthy person, and they would dress the healthy person in the big day chamudais of Adam and Chava, and he would wear, and the lame person would wear a mask that was made out of the skin of Rabbi Shmuel. Like we say by the Asar Aruge Malchus, that when the king wanted, the Roman king wanted to kill Rabbi Shmuel, so his daughter is like, no, you should save him because he's so beautiful. So he's like, oh, we'll save him, we'll kill him, but we'll like peel off his face and we'll like preserve it so like you can look at his face. So like the face of Rabbi Shmuel was preserved, and then the lame guy was wearing the face of Rabbi Shmuel, and as if to represent Yaakov Avinu, because Yaakov Avinu was lame because he was Hutzalei al Yerechai when the Malach of Esau hit him on his sciatic nerve, so he was limping, so he was like sort of like lame, and that was the minhag. And it would say certain things. I forgot exactly what it was that you see over here that Esau was miskaber over Yaakov. It made such a declaration.
It's like Yaakov is a liar or something.
That Yaakov was a liar or something like that.
He tricked Esau.
So yeah, that he tricked Esau. So this is something that there was a minhag in Rome that they do this once every 70 years, and it's like whoever saw it. If you didn't see it, so that's it. You missed it for your life, because 70 years is a lifespan. The other Mepharshim say because 70 years is the amount of time that the original goal, the first Galus Babel was 70 years. So they do like after their Galus Edom. So like every 70 years we're saying like the Galus is not over yet. We're still overpowering Yaakov Avinu.
The Galus only lasted for a few hundred years because after the Germanic tribes.
Yeah,
so how many times could have they had this occasion?
I don't know.
And even the times of the Gemara, the people that by Rome was for a few hundred years only. So
yeah, I don't know.
We couldn't have done it too many times.
It's true. But so the question is, but it says in the Gemara that they would dress him in the clothes of Adam and Chava, in the big day of Chamudais, right? But over here in the Medrash we said it was buried, it was gone. So what happened? So I want to say, if you look in the Yaibitz, in the Gemara over there, the Hagles Yaibitz from Yaakov Emden on that Gemara, so he says it's Lav Dafka. They didn't actually have the begadim of Adam and Chava and dress this guy in it. Rather, what they did is, they, in their own imagination, they decided, okay, this is how the clothing of Adam and Chava looked, and they said, and they dressed the guy in that, and they said, like, this represents the clothing of Adam, but not that they actually had the big day chamudas, which is because, like Pirkei Beleza says over here, that it was hidden.
It was the big day kahuna. After the story, they took the big day kahuna.
Could be they took the big day kahuna too, but Rashi says that it was the big day chamudas.
Yeah.
If you learn, like the Mad Alman, that the big day chamudas were the big day kahuna, anyways, it's not a question. But the ones that the who says it? The Hadar Zakanim, other Mepharshim. Okay. Shkoyach for coming. Have a good talk.